Imagine an archipelago so vast, so impossibly beautiful, that even the people who live there have not seen all of it. Imagine over 7,000 islands, 7,000. Each one its own world, with its own dialect, its own food, its own heartbeat. Imagine waters so clear you can see the bottom from 30 feet above the surface, jungles so thick they swallow the sound of the outside world entirely, volcanoes rising from flat plains like sleeping giants, and rice terraces carved into mountainsides 2,000 years ago by human hands alone. No machines, no technology, just patience, ingenuity, and an intimate understanding of the land. This is the Philippines. And it is one of the most extraordinary places on the face of this earth. Today, we are going on a journey. Not just a tour of landscapes or a highlight reel of tourist snapshots, but a real, deep, immersive look at what makes this nation so breathtaking, so alive, and so unlike anywhere else in the world. We are going to talk about its nature, its people, its history, its culture, its food, and the invisible thread that ties all of it together into something that can only be described as magic. So sit back. Let this wash over you. Because once you understand the Philippines, you will never look at the world the same way again. Let us begin with the geography, because everything else, the culture, the food, the people, the history, flows directly from the land. The Philippines is an archipelago nation in Southeast Asia, sitting in the western Pacific Ocean. It is made up of more than 7,000 islands, though only around 2,000 of them are inhabited. The total land area is roughly the size of Italy, but because it is broken into so many pieces scattered across the sea, the coastline is staggering. The Philippines has one of the longest coastlines in the world. Think about that for a moment. Thousands upon thousands of kilometers of coastline. Beach after beach after beach, many of them completely untouched, unmarked on any major map, known only to local fishermen who have been sailing the same routes for generations. The islands are divided into three major groupings. In the north, you have the largest island, where the capital city sits and where the lowland plains feed tens of millions of people with rice. In the middle, you have a cluster of smaller islands known for their warm people, their festivals, and some of the most iconic scenery in the country. And in the south, you have the largest landmass in terms of sheer geographic area, a sprawling, diverse region full of rainforest, indigenous communities, and a rich Islamic heritage that stretches back centuries before colonization ever arrived. But the geography is not just about islands. The Philippines is a volcanic nation, sitting along the Pacific Ring of Fire. There are over 20 active volcanoes in the country. Some of them are among the most perfectly formed volcanoes on the planet, near perfect cones rising from the middle of lakes, or from the sea itself. One of them is famously considered a volcano within a lake within a volcano within a lake, a geological nesting doll that seems almost too strange to be real. And yet it sits there, steaming gently, surrounded by water, framed by distant mountains, absolutely real. The mountains of the Philippines are ancient and dramatic. In the northern part of the main island, the Cordillera mountain range runs down the spine of the land like a backbone. These highlands are cool when the rest of the country is hot, and they are home to some of the most remarkable engineering achievements in human history. Rice terraces that the indigenous peoples of the highlands built over 2,000 years ago, terrace by terrace, generation by generation, coaxing flat land out of steep mountainsides so that crops could grow where crops had no business growing. These terraces are not just agricultural infrastructure. They are a living monument to human determination and cultural continuity. The same communities that built them still farm them today, using many of the same techniques, guided by many of the same traditions. Down from the mountains and toward the sea, the land flattens into vast agricultural plains. This is where most of the country's rice grows. Rice, in the Philippines, is not just food. It is identity. It is culture. It is the thing that structured daily life for thousands of years. You will understand this better when we get to the food, but for now, Just understand that the flat lowlands of the Philippines are some of the most fertile land in all of Asia, fed by volcanic soil that has been enriched by eruptions for millions of years. And then there is the forest. The Philippine rainforest is one of the most biodiverse ecosystems on the planet. Scientists have classified the Philippines as one of the world's megadiverse countries, a term reserved for the handful of nations that contain the greatest concentrations of plant and animal species on Earth. The forests here are home to thousands of species found nowhere else in the world. Entire families of plants and animals evolved in isolation on these islands, producing creatures of breathtaking strangeness and beauty. More on that in a moment. But first, the water. No discussion of the Philippines is complete without a serious, extended conversation about the sea. Because the sea is not just a backdrop here. It is the central character of the entire story. The Philippines sits at the heart of what marine biologists call the Coral Triangle, a region of the Western Pacific Ocean that contains the highest diversity of marine life on the planet. More species of fish, coral, sea turtle, and marine invertebrate live in and around the Coral Triangle than anywhere else on Earth. And the Philippines is right at the center of it. The waters around the Philippine Islands are extraordinarily rich. There are coral reefs here of astonishing beauty and complexity, entire underwater cities teeming with thousands of species. Schools of fish so thick they block the light from above. Sea turtles gliding through clear blue water with the calm confidence of creatures that have been doing this for 100 million years. Whale sharks, the largest fish in the ocean, gentle giants that feed only on plankton, gathering in certain bays at certain times of year, predictable enough that divers and snorkelers can swim alongside them in a moment of connection that defies ordinary language. There are underwater caves and caverns, hidden tunnels through cliff faces, submerged lakes within saltwater lakes, and wrecks of ships from the Second World War now colonized by coral and turned into artificial reefs, haunted and beautiful in equal measure. The sea in the Philippines has depth, literal and metaphorical. It holds history, mystery, and life in quantities that continue to astound scientists. The tides and currents that move through the Philippine archipelago have shaped the lives of its people for thousands of years. Filipino communities have always been maritime communities. They built boats, they sailed, they traded, they explored. Long before European ships arrived in Asian waters, Filipino sailors were already crossing vast distances in outrigger vessels, navigating by stars and by their intimate, generational knowledge of the sea. The barangay, the smallest unit of Filipino political organization, which still exists today as the name for a neighborhood or village, originally referred to a boat. A community was a crew. The social unit was the vessel. This is how deeply the sea is woven into Filipino identity. The fishing villages that dot the coastlines of the Philippines carry this heritage quietly. Wooden boats painted in vivid colors, called bangkas, sit on beaches or float in harbors, their outrigger frames extending out to either side like the wings of a bird about to take flight. Fishermen leave before dawn and return with the morning, their catch destined for markets and kitchens and restaurant tables across the islands. This rhythm, sea, boat, fish, market, table, has not changed in its essential shape in centuries. And the sun sets over the Philippine Sea. There are not adequate words. The water catches the colors of the sky and multiplies them, spreads them across the surface in shades of orange and pink and gold and violet that seem almost theatrical in their intensity. Silhouettes of bangka boats against a burning horizon. The sound of small waves on sand. This is the image that stops people in their tracks the first time they experience it, and it does not stop being astonishing with repetition. Now let us talk about the creatures. The Philippines is home to an extraordinary array of endemic wildlife, species that exist here and nowhere else on Earth. This is a direct consequence of the archipelago's geography. When species are separated by water for millions of years, they evolve independently, producing entirely new forms of life. The Philippines has had millions of years to do this, and the results are spectacular. Perhaps the most famous of the Philippine endemic animals is the Philippine eagle, one of the largest, most powerful eagles on Earth. With a wingspan that can reach over 2 meters and a face framed by long brown and white feathers that give it an almost lion-like appearance, the Philippine eagle is a creature of genuine majesty. It is the national bird of the Philippines, and it has achieved something close to mythological status in the national imagination. It is also critically endangered. There are thought to be fewer than 800 individuals remaining in the wild, surviving in the remaining fragments of old-growth forest on the larger southern islands. Conservation efforts are ongoing and serious, but the threat is real. The Philippine eagle is a symbol not just of national pride, but of the urgent, unfinished work of protecting what remains. Then there is the tarsier, one of the smallest primates on the planet, and one of the most remarkable. The tarsier looks, at first glance, like something that was designed by a committee that could not agree on proportions. Its body is small enough to fit in a human palm. Its eyes are enormous. Each eye is roughly the same size as its entire brain, making the tarsier the animal with the largest eyes relative to body size of any known vertebrate. It cannot move its eyes in their sockets, so it rotates its head up to 180 degrees instead, like an owl. It is nocturnal, carnivorous, and utterly silent in the forest at night. And it is found only in the Philippines. A creature so strange and specific that it seems like it should not exist, and yet there it is, clinging to a branch in a Philippine forest, staring at you with those impossible eyes. The Philippine forest also contains the world's smallest hoofed mammal, the Philippine mouse deer, a tiny deer-like creature that stands barely 30 centimeters at the shoulder and lives in lowland forest. It also contains the Visayan warty pig, a distinctive wild pig with a crest of long hair on its head that gives it a comically punk appearance. And the Philippine flying lemur, which does not actually fly, but glides on a membrane of skin stretched between its limbs, drifting between trees like a living kite. In the rivers and coastal waters, the Philippine crocodile, smaller and rarer than its saltwater cousin, still survives in isolated populations, subject to intensive conservation work. The sea around the islands is home to dugongs, those large, slow, ancient-looking sea mammals that are relatives of the manatee and that gave rise to sailor legends of mermaids in the waters of Southeast Asia. And the birds. The Philippines has one of the richest bird faunas in Asia. Hundreds of species have been recorded here, with a large proportion found nowhere else. Colorful kingfishers, rare bleeding heart pigeons whose breast feathers are splashed with a vivid red patch that looks disturbingly like a wound, hornbills with enormous decorative casques on their beaks, and tiny sunbirds that hover at flowers like Southeast Asian hummingbirds. The biodiversity of the Philippines is not an accident. It is the product of millions of years of island isolation, tropical climate, and the extraordinary variety of habitats, from deep ocean trenches to coral reefs to mangrove forests to lowland jungle to highland cloud forest, that the archipelago provides. It is also under serious threat from deforestation, development, and the pressures of a growing human population. The Philippines has lost the majority of its original forest cover over the past century. What remains is precious, irreplaceable, and increasingly recognized as worth protecting by Filipinos themselves. Now we come to the heart of the matter. The Philippines has a population of over 110 million people, making it one of the most populous nations in Asia and the world. And these are among the most remarkable people on Earth. Not because of any single characteristic, but because of a constellation of qualities that, taken together, produce a culture of astonishing warmth, resilience, creativity, and depth. Let us start with something called bayanihan. It is a Filipino word that has no perfect English translation, which is always a sign that you are dealing with something genuinely important. Bayanihan describes the spirit of communal unity, of neighbors helping neighbors, of a community coming together to share a burden that would be too heavy for any one person to carry alone. The classic image associated with bayanihan is of a group of people literally carrying a neighbor's house, lifting a bamboo structure and walking it to a new location together, because moving house was a community effort, not a personal one. Bayanihan is not just a historical practice. It is a living value that surfaces constantly in Filipino life, in the way communities respond to natural disasters, in the way overseas Filipino workers send money home to support not just their immediate family but extended relatives and even friends, in the way strangers in a Filipino household are greeted not as guests but as family. Because family is everything in the Philippines. Filipino family structures are expansive and inclusive. The concept of family extends well beyond parents and children. It encompasses grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, ninongs and nanangs, godparents, barkadas, close friend groups that function as chosen family, and a web of social relationships that create a dense, overlapping network of mutual obligation and affection. This is not always simple or easy. The weight of family obligation can be immense, and the expectation that success is shared can create its own pressures. But the warmth it generates, the security it provides, the sense of never being entirely alone, these are gifts that Filipino culture gives its members from birth. The Filipino people are extraordinarily hospitable. This is not a stereotype or a tourism slogan. It is a deeply held cultural value that plays out in real, specific ways. If you visit a Filipino home, you will be fed. This is not negotiable. To offer food is to offer care, and to refuse food is, in Filipino culture, to refuse a gesture of love. The food will likely be abundant, far more than you could possibly eat, because abundance is itself a form of generosity. You may be given the best chair in the room, the largest portion at the table, the most comfortable sleeping arrangement. Your needs will be anticipated before you can articulate them. Filipinos are also famously joyful. This is a people who have endured, throughout their history, colonization, occupation, natural disaster, political upheaval, and poverty, often in combination. And yet the Filipino reputation for cheerfulness is genuine and persistent. It is not naive or denial-based. Filipinos can be, and often are, extraordinarily candid about hardship. But there is a cultural resilience, a capacity for finding lightness in difficulty, that is both admirable and moving. The word for this is something like galing, a kind of courteous humor, a gentle refusal to let suffering have the last word. You hear it in the laughter that fills Filipino households. You see it in the way Filipinos turn floods and typhoons into moments of improvised community, sharing what they have, checking on their neighbors, making jokes to take the edge off terror. The Philippines is also one of the most multilingual nations on Earth. There are over 170 distinct languages spoken across the archipelago, not dialects, but fully distinct languages with their own grammar and vocabulary. The national language is Filipino, based on Tagalog, and it is spoken across the country. English is also an official language and is spoken fluently by most educated Filipinos, a legacy of American colonial education that has paradoxically become one of the Philippines' greatest economic advantages in the globalized world. But beneath these national languages, the regional languages persist: Cebuano, Ilocano, Hiligaynon, Waray, Kapampangan, Bicolano, Tausug, and dozens more, each one a vessel for a distinct cultural tradition, a distinct literature, a distinct way of understanding the world. This linguistic diversity is a mirror of cultural diversity. The Philippines is not a monolithic culture. It is a collection of cultures, each with its own music, its own cuisine, its own festivals, its own spiritual practices, its own history. The lowland Catholic Filipino culture that most outsiders encounter first is real and vibrant, but it coexists with indigenous highland cultures that maintain animist traditions and oral literatures of great antiquity, with the rich Islamic civilization of the southern islands, with Chinese Filipino communities that have been present for centuries and woven their heritage deep into the fabric of Filipino life, and with 100 other threads that do not fit into any single narrative. To understand the Philippines fully, you need to understand its history. And Philippine history is a story of extraordinary complexity, of indigenous civilizations, of contact and trade, of colonization and resistance, of adaptation and survival, of a national identity forged under pressure and still being refined. Before European ships arrived in the 16th century, the Philippine archipelago was already a sophisticated place. It was not a unified nation. There was no single Philippine state, but there were dozens of thriving polities, trading kingdoms, and communities connected to each other and to the wider Asian world by robust maritime trade networks. Filipino traders sailed to and from China, Japan, Borneo, Java, and Malacca. Chinese porcelain and silk arrived in Philippine ports. Filipino goods, gold, beeswax, forest products, traveled outward in return. The great kingdoms of Southeast Asia touched the Philippines. Islam had already taken root in the southern islands before Spain arrived, and it continues to define the identity of millions of Filipinos today. Then came over 300 years of Spanish colonial rule, the longest period of European colonization in Asia. The Spanish brought Catholicism, which transformed Filipino spiritual life in ways that persist to this day. They brought new administrative structures, new architecture, new languages, new crops. They also brought exploitation, forced labor, and a systematic suppression of indigenous culture and knowledge. The tension between what Spanish colonization gave and what it took runs through Filipino cultural consciousness like a fault line. The Catholic faith that Spain introduced did not simply replace what was there. It was absorbed into Filipino spirituality and transformed in the process. Filipino Catholicism is one of the most fervent and distinctive expressions of the faith in the world. The great religious festivals, particularly the celebration of the Santo Niño and the reenactment of the Passion of Christ, are not quiet, private affairs. They are public eruptions of collective devotion, involving millions of people, spanning multiple days, combining prayer and procession and music and community in a way that is both deeply Christian and thoroughly, distinctly Filipino. After Spain came the United States, which acquired the Philippines after the Spanish-American War of 1898. American rule brought a different set of influences, a public education system taught in English, democratic political institutions, however imperfectly implemented, a cultural orientation toward American popular culture that remains visible today. It also brought the Philippine-American War, a brutal, largely forgotten conflict in which Filipino resistance to American annexation was suppressed at enormous cost of life. This chapter of history is less well known in the West than it deserves to be, and it shaped Filipino attitudes toward sovereignty and self-determination in ways that still echo. The Second World War arrived in the Philippines with devastating force. Japanese occupation lasted from 1941 to 1945, and the fighting, particularly the liberation of the capital in 1945, caused catastrophic destruction and death. The Battle of Manila was one of the most destructive urban battles in the entire Pacific War, leaving the historic city center in ruins and killing tens of thousands of civilians. Filipinos who lived through this period carry memories of extraordinary horror and extraordinary heroism in equal measure. The war is not ancient history here. Its traces are visible in the landscape, in family stories, in national memory. Independence came in 1946. The decades that followed were turbulent, periods of democratic promise, authoritarian rule, a declaration of martial law in the 1970s under Ferdinand Marcos that plunged the country into dictatorship for over a decade, and then the extraordinary EDSA People Power Revolution of 1986, in which millions of ordinary Filipinos took peacefully to the streets and brought down a dictator without a single shot being fired. The People Power Revolution is one of the great nonviolent political events of the 20th century, and it is a source of profound national pride. A moment when the Filipino capacity for collective action in the name of justice expressed itself on the world stage. The history is complicated. It is not a clean story of heroes and villains. But running through all of it is something constant, a Filipino stubbornness, a refusal to be permanently broken, a capacity to absorb catastrophe and reconstitute something vital on the other side of it. Filipinos call it discarte. A kind of resourceful, improvisational problem solving, a talent for finding a way when no obvious way exists. It is the cultural response to a history that has required constant adaptation, and it is one of the qualities that makes the Filipino people so compelling and so admirable. If you want to understand Filipino culture quickly, go to a festival. Because the Philippines is a nation that knows how to celebrate. There are festivals here for every imaginable occasion, for harvests, for saints' days, for historical events, for the seasons, for local pride, for the simple joy of being alive and together. Some of the festivals are ancient, rooted in pre-colonial practices that were adapted and overlaid with Catholic significance. Others are more recent inventions that have taken on a life of their own. But virtually all of them share certain qualities: color, noise, community, generosity, and an exuberant refusal to do anything halfway. The street parades of the Philippines are something to behold. Elaborate floats constructed over months, decorated with intricate patterns made from thousands of flowers, shells, seeds, feathers, and other natural materials. Dancers in costumes of breathtaking craftsmanship, some of the costumes representing months of work by community artisans, moving to rhythms that combine indigenous percussion with colonial musical influences. Marching bands, drumlines, processions of devotees, food stalls lining every available space, offering everything from grilled meats on sticks to rice cakes wrapped in banana leaves to cold drinks in plastic bags sealed with rubber bands. A distinctly Filipino innovation that manages to be both practical and endearing. The Santa Cruzan, a pageant held in May that combines a religious procession with a beauty pageant, sees young women dressed as various biblical figures and historical queens, walking through flower-decorated streets accompanied by their escorts. It is at once a Catholic devotional practice, a community social event, and a celebration of feminine beauty and dignity, and it is taken with complete seriousness in the towns and cities where it is observed.